To say good morning to United States Senator Roy Blunt. Senator Blunt, good morning. How are you, sir?
Hey, good morning, Tom. I'm good, and it's good to be talking to you. What's the weather like in Columbia this morning?
Well, right now, there's a little sun and there's a little blue out there. There's a chance of rain, but, man, it's going to be 75 today.
The perfect temperature for human existence is somewhere right around 75, I think. So that's good.
Which is about the same temperature for perfect golf. You know, it's interesting how those two are just perfect for each other. Which I hope you get a chance to play sometime soon if you do partake. Saturday, I don't think you had a chance to play because you were in the middle of delivering the weekly Republican address, and I want to go back to that. Time flies when you and I get on the phone together like this. So we're only going to have time to talk about a couple of issues. One is a big issue, and it nails a couple of concerns out there. And it's about energy, and it's about our national security, and it's about jobs, and it has the name by the Keystone Pipeline. Would you talk about that for a few minutes?
Well, you're exactly right, Tom. They all three go together, and they go together pretty easily in that one failure of the administration just to do what's the right thing for American families and American jobs. Let's talk about jobs first. First of all, for 50 years, we've consumed more energy than we could produce. So we know the marketplace is there. It's there in a bad economy or a good economy. But let's have more American energy of all kinds, but a whole bunch of that energy has to be the traditional energy that we almost all use right now. More natural gas, more oil, more gasoline for our cars. And if we could produce that in our own economy, we should do that. The next best thing to our own economy would be neighbors that we trust and we know we're going to have a good long-term relationship with. And frankly, there's nobody better than Canada as a trading partner or as an ally. It's much better to get 830,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada than just for technical and practical reasons, but also for security reasons, than to try to ship it a third of the way or halfway around the world. And then the immediate jobs to build that pipeline, 20,000 jobs, not one of them paid by a taxpayer. And in fact, they all pay taxes. Every one of those people that gets one of those 20,000 jobs to build the pipeline, and then all of the things that come if we're refining our own gas rather than trying to get gasoline from somebody else. It does seem to me that it's as close to a no-brainer as any decision you could make. The State Department twice has told the administration, and they have a responsibility to do this because you got to cross the Canadian border, that there is really no reason not to do this. And the president is so extreme on some of these environmental issues that he just can't make himself do this thing that makes so much sense on all fronts.
You know, you mentioned no-brainer. It's almost as if instead of it being a no-brainer to make the decision to do it, it's obvious you have no brain if you're against it. Roy, I cannot for the life of me figure it out. It's almost an absolute easy as pie shoe-in for the president to get his second term if he was to stand behind this and call it his work. 800,000 barrels of oil a day?
Right. And particularly if he'd have stood behind it even earlier, Tom, these people would be at work and they would know they were at work. And the economy is not in a position where we don't know if we get 20,000 jobs that we wouldn't have otherwise. I think now the president we continue to try to think of ways to force him into signing this bill that would do the right thing, but it won't be nearly as visible for his re-election as it would have been if he'd have done the right thing at the right time.
And you know, many of us...
It's very frustrating.
So many of us believe that we do need to pursue energy on all fronts. No question about that. But when we have when we're geared for using petro and we have this available to us, we have to move in this direction. Right now, we're all driving cars that use gasoline. The price at the pump is extraordinarily high. And in your weekly Republican address that you had the chance to give on Saturday, you talked about the price of gasoline when Obama took office and what it is today. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Well, it was $1.91 was the national average in January of 2009. Now it's a dime or 20 cents more than twice that high. Average around the country, it's between $3.90 and $4. The average bounced around the last couple of weeks, so more than twice as high, and just bad energy policies. And I am truly for all of the above. I'm for, finding more conservation. Let's figure out ways to use what we use more effectively, and let's invest in the future. Let's find out what comes next. But, you said, Tom, that we almost all drive cars now that have gasoline that goes in the gas tank. That's going to be the case 10 years from now, no matter what comes 30 years from now. And it's foolish to think otherwise. Even if you did know what would eventually replace gasoline, you wouldn't want to say, and every car will be run that way in 3 years. The economy and families couldn't absorb that. So it will be decades before we transition to another kind of power source. Let's take advantage of the fossil fuels we have while we're trying to figure out what eventually replaces them. We think now we have more natural gas than anybody in the world. We have more coal. We've known this for a long time than anybody in the world. And we have a whole lot of oil that we're not properly using to our economic advantage. Every other country in the world looks at its natural resources, and the first two words they think of are economic opportunity. Only in the United States do any significant number of leaders look at our own resources, and the first two words they think of are environmental hazard. What's the worst thing that could possibly happen, and what would happen if that happened every single day? What a bad policy that is for American jobs and American families.
It is 7:44. We're on the phone with United States Senator Roy Blunt. Where are we with policy and the ability to actually see the Keystone Pipeline come around? Can this happen? Is it going to happen?
I think it is. We're still trying to find a way to put it in the transportation bill that we need to have a good transportation bill that maintains our road and bridge, our highway system. I keep thinking the president at some point will be able to turn to his supporters and say, look, I've resisted this as long as I could, but they have just forced me now into accepting this, and I'm going to have to sign this bill. Somewhere in the back of his mind, surely that's what he actually wants to have happen, and I'm certainly for doing everything I can to try to create that moment when he feels like he has no choice, or at least can say he has no choice, but to sign good legislation that says let's secure our energy future, part of our energy future, by being dependent on North American energy rather than energy that principally comes now from countries that don't like us very well.
Roy, we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to shift over to another subject matter that has been a favorite for me to bring up. And you may be thinking in a different line than I am, and I want to learn more about this. And it's been brought to the front burner again this week in Washington. You talked about it in the last few days, and that's the Postal Service. And instead of closing some of these small-town post offices, you say there are other things that we can do first that has to do with their spending that is just out of whack and needs to be taken a look at. Explain that for us.
Well, I think that's right. The retirement system, the Susan Collins and Joe Lieberman were on the floor of the Senate yesterday talking about people who get a disability claim against the post office, and they continue to get their disability pay even when they're old enough to get retirement pay. And the disability pay is there's more than one person. I think they said 3 people over 100 that were postal workers 50 years ago or so that are still getting the disability compensation as if they might go back to work tomorrow rather than retirement. It's the big money is in the future benefits, and I think the post office, just like state government in Missouri, is going to have to treat future retirees different or future employees different than current employees as it relates to retirement. The post office in so many little communities is the last thing that really creates that sense of community. Maybe they don't all need to be open for 8 or 9 hours a day, maybe rather than not have a post office, a little building that doesn't cost much to rent, that you run that post office in one community from 8 to 10, and maybe in the community next door you run their post office from 5 to 7, and make that all work so that you have Postal Service and you know when the Postal Service is there. Senator Bennett and I from Colorado have said, instead of saying we can't ever close any post office, let's be sure that there's somebody in this argument that's an advocate for the current facility, so that there's someone who comes in and makes the case as to what you could do to make that facility still work.
Interesting. Senator Blunt, thank you for joining us this morning. And like I said, the time always flies when we're talking. So thank you for your opinions on this and for the hard work that you're doing. And let's get back together again soon.
Hey, Tom, I look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks for what you do every day.